Michel already presented me. This is my office, which is not a very fancy place, even if we are 25 kilometers from the Eiffel Tower. It could be better. Lab. This is an institute called Laboratoire des Sciences du Climat et de l'Environnement. It's about 350 persons working there. So it's quite a big institute for France. In this thematic. It's part of 3 agencies, the National Research Agency, CNRS, the Atomic Research Agency, CEA, and the University of Versailles. So this is a view of my main office. Hopefully, I have many secondary offices in my work, and because we have a network, I will show later. So this is a slide I show to my students to convince them to come in our lab making some study. So I see there are some students. So if you want to make some travel, you are welcome to make some to integrate a program. And so this is a place where we are doing continuous measurement for some global site, mostly in the tropics, in France and around Paris area. So today I will talk mostly some example of the research we use using this data and also the Paris area. So it involves many persons, both working at the LSE, which is a central coordinator of all these stations, and also at the different stations we have collaboration going on. So for the menu today, I will go first with an update of the global CO2 emission with the latest data we have. Then I will go to explain how we plan to use atmospheric measurement to quantify regional scale emissions. And then I will go at a smaller scale, city scale emissions, to finish with few slides about the project, French-Mexican project called Merci CO2 to develop some research program in Mexico City, which is really a laboratory for this kind of measurement because this is an emerging topic for CO2. So first slide, of course, the reason why we care so much about CO2 is that it is the main driver of the global warming. Here you have so indication of the uncertainty about what will be the warming, considering the economic development we will choose in the future. What is not shown here is that in addition to this uncertainty about the economic scenario, there is also a large uncertainty in the carbon cycle. So even if we will know the exact trajectory of CO2 emission, that doesn't mean that we will know precisely what the concentration will be in the atmosphere, because we have to take into account not only the emissions by use of fossil fuel, but then the CO2 go in the atmosphere and then interact with the other reservoir of the carbon cycle, which are the ocean and the terrestrial ecosystems, which interact permanently CO2 with the atmosphere, acting either as a source or as a sinks to make the concentration we have. And this the status of the global carbon may change in the future because most of these exchange are sensitive to the global warming. Yes. So I will come back to this figure. So systematic measurement of CO2 in the atmosphere was started only 60 years ago by this guy, a US scientist called Dave Keeling. He has been also in a nice place in Hawaii to start measurement of CO2 in the year 57. And this is this curve. So prior to this, the information we have is coming from the ice core that you probably know. That we are able to pick up the small bubbles of air which are trapped in the ice down in the ice core. And so we are able to measure the CO2 down to 1 million years about in the past. So I will not talk about this glacial, interglacial variability of CO2, but it's just to illustrate the fact that since the pre-industrial area, we have increased the concentration of CO2 by about 45%. The reason, of course, of this increase is the fact we are using more and more fossil fuel, either coal, oil, gas. And we have a pretty good knowledge at the global scale of how much CO2 is emitted by the atmosphere. This is based on statistics of how many tons of petrol is used in each country. Each country has to report to the United Nations Convention for Climate Change. Every country report how many fossil fuels they have been using, and we have to convert that in a CO2 emission. If we look at the last 3 decades, we see that we have a pretty large increase, a fast increase, plus 3% per year for about 10 years, around 2005, which is mostly correspond to the economic growth of China, very fast. Then we had the economic crisis in 2008, and leading to these 2 years of slowdown of the emission due to the slowdown of the economic activity. But it was very temporary. Then we start again with a fast increase of global emission in the atmosphere. And then we are quite surprised that between 2014 and 2016, there was not much evolution anymore. So some optimistic people were thinking that maybe we have reached the peak of emission of CO2, but unfortunately, the latest statistic for the year 2017 shows that again an increase of 2% compared to the year before. In addition to this emission of CO2 by the use of fossil fuel, we have also to add this other emission due to land use change, mostly the deforestation in the tropics, which is adding a little bit more CO2 in the emission. Well, now it's only 10%, 12%, but in the past it was much more important contribution in proportion. So adding these two, we see that we have an emission of about 41 gigaton of CO2, of billion of tons of CO2 in the atmosphere, going in the atmosphere every year. Then the second component of the global carbon cycle that we know very well, thanks to the measurement we do in the atmosphere, is all the CO2 is increasing in the atmosphere. So this is the same period, about 60 years. We see that we have this long-term record. And what we do, looking at the curve, how it is, the slope of the curve, how it is changing, we can estimate what we call the growth rate, how much CO2 is increasing every year, which is shown here in a gigaton of CO2 per year. And we see that, of course, it is increasing, but the rate of increase is also accelerating, okay? We have more and more increase. We see that also a large year-to-year variability. Now, if we put together the emission, what is injected in the atmosphere, and one is stored in the atmosphere, we see that only 50% of the CO2 that we emit in the atmosphere remains there. Okay, so the increase that we currently observe in the atmosphere should be 2 times faster. This is not the case because the rest, the difference between this one and this one is accumulating in the ocean and in the terrestrial ecosystem. There is no other way. It has to go there. So by difference, we can find the global estimate, and with other programs in the terrestrial and the ocean, we can make this global budget with 50% of our emission about going in the atmosphere, is responsible for this increase, 30% in the terrestrial ecosystem, and about 1/4 going to the ocean. So this is the current knowledge we have on the carbon cycle, but this is at the global scale. So now the challenge is to go at a more regional scale. It's really needed because we have to understand which oceanic part of which ecosystem. Is it more the boreal forest or the Amazonian forest, which is taking up a lot of CO2. So this is important to know and to understand the process and to see also the sensitivity of the process to the climate change. This is the only way we can hope to predict what will be the future of this carbon sink, and so the future of the carbon concentration. A second aspect, more socio-economic, of this regional scale estimation of the flux is that we need transparent and independent verification of the country declaration. So far, we ask the country to say how much CO2 they have been emitted in the atmosphere. So you have to trust them, every country. So in some cases we can have errors or not. So it's important if we want to have a good, successful implementation of reduction emission with a protocol like the Kyoto Protocol, the Paris Agreement. This will be needed really to have this kind of validation. Then, if we go at the regional scale, we are facing some problem of larger uncertainties that we didn't have in global. This is, for example, the inventory of China. And we have different scenarios. And just recently, by changing in the database, one information about the type of coal they are using, they decrease the emission of China by 30%. So it's quite important. Also, this is in Europe. These are 2 inventories which are supposed to say the same things about the emission of anthropogenic at each box. But you see that these two inventories differ by a factor of 2, depending on the region. So there are large uncertainty. So if we want to tackle this kind of uncertainty, we'll need a lot of information. So this is what we call the framework in which we want to use atmospheric data, but it's not the only information. We will need to gather in this kind of protocol called inverse modeling. We will need to use all the in situ measurement, also satellite measurement, which are coming up for CO2, CH4. We will use a very good, we will need a very good atmospheric transport model to make the link with the surface emission. And we will, because the surface concentration, we will not be enough data to directly estimate the space-time distribution of the flux. We need an a priori knowledge of the emission. So we are using maps of statistics or a model for the vegetation. So with these maps, we run a simulation using this model. The model is predicting some 3D field of CO2. Then we make the comparison between the simulation with the observation. Of course, we have mismatch. And we use this mismatch to correct, to modify a little bit this emission to come up with what we call the optimized emission, which is using not only the a priori knowledge, but also the additional information coming from the atmosphere. Then this is the way we want to correct the inventories with atmosphere. Just one example, not for CO2, but CH4, for UK. And this is in green. You have the value that the UK is reporting to the UNFCCC as their annual emission of CH4. And this in red, this is an estimate with this inverse modeling based on atmospheric measurement done by our colleagues from UK. And you see that there is a large discrepancy. And so meaning that the estimate from the statistics was too high, significantly too high, and so it has been corrected since then. And the reason was probably an error in the emission factor in the landfill, but okay, it has been corrected. So for CO2, it's a little bit more tricky because contrary to the CH4, where you have only emission, for CO2 you have emission and sinks with a very high space and time variability. So to do this verification of the inventory, we need much more data, not only a few sites in the country. So that's the reason why we are developing a lot of stations. This is a view of what we call the historical measurement, because after I will show other kind of making the measurement, other type of measurement. So historically, we were in the 70s, 80s, the network has been developed by this kind of program of flask sampling, which enables the measurement with a very small system in the field, and then we have some central lab making the measurement of the flask, and you can have like this one measurement every week. You can follow the train on the seasonal cycle. Now we are developing a lot of, thanks to the development of new infrared spectrometer using laser diode. It's somehow easier to make the measurement, so we can develop in this side the in situ surface observation as well as the airborne observation. So you see that we have 100, 200 stations going on at the background station, but of course it is not distributed in a homogeneous way. Of course, we cannot expect the atmospheric measurement to say the same information in Siberia, where we have no data more or less, compared to Europe or US, where we have much more information. So there are new monitoring programs. For sure, in the next decade, there will be a huge development of satellite measurement. There are many projects going on to measure CO2, CH4, and N2O. So this will be a huge development in the next decade. And still, we have also this total column measurement, but you probably know this one because you have a good expertise here in the Michel group at CCA. And we are also developing some innovative way to make a vertical profile. There are also some LiDAR measurement, which enables some kind of tomography of the CO2 concentration over Paris, for example. And I will come back to this development of low-cost sensor after. So each of these programs is bringing new information, which is good. And what is also important, there is some cross-validation. For example, the total column measurement from the ground are very important to calibrate the same measurement coming from the space. So coming back to the traditional measurement at the surface, this is some picture of the measurement of the instrument used over the past decades, using mostly infrared with some gas chromatography in some case. And so the instruments are becoming more and more compact and reliable somehow, but what is not changing over time, for the calibration, we always use as a reference, we have to measure air coming from these high pressure tanks. Okay, so this is something which is really important. I will show some slides about that, and which can be at the moment a bottleneck for the development of the network, because the provision of these calibration tanks is done only by one lab. The WMO has given the mandate to one institute, NOAA, which is located in Boulder, Colorado, to make to provide to everybody, to every scientist, the calibration material for CO2 measurement. So the reference scale is made of 15 tanks like this, which were prepared in the year 1990 very precisely. So you know precisely how much CO2 there is in each of these tanks by volumetric method. And then afterward, this is the primary tanks. That is really the master calibration for all the stations. Then at the NOAA, they have secondary tanks that they use to calibrate tanks that they provide to the stations. Because it is expensive, in most cases, we have some secondary also, for example, in Europe, in ICOS, but also here we have purchased some tanks from the NOAA directly, and then you have to prepare some additional mixer, which will go to the station to correct for the possible drift of the instrument. So that's the way it is going. So this is difficult. You have some uncertainty going on at the way we propagate this calibration scale, but this is the way we are doing at the moment. And it is difficult because we have very high, we want a very high precision for the CO2. We want the recommendation that we prepare in the context of WMO is to have a compatibility goal. That means that the CO2 measurement made at different place must agree within plus or minus 0.1 ppm in the background site and plus or minus 0.2 ppm in the regional site. So that's really a very high challenge. And you can question, why do we want such a high precision? If we look at these signals from two stations in France, that we have signal by 10 variability by 10, 40 ppb. So you could say, well, come on, you don't need to have a 0.1 ppm precision to characterize this variability. It's easy with less precision. The point is that these stations are separated by 300 kilometers. So if we want to estimate the CO2 emission fluxes between these two, what the signal which will matter is the difference between the two. So basically, we want to know if an air mass coming to this site, then transport there for a few hours after. We want to know how much CO2 we have in addition or less, and which is related to the flux between the two. And so if we make the differences between the two, then the signals that we have to interpret with the model is on the order of 1-2 ppm. So if we want to characterize this kind of signals, that's why you absolutely need this level of precision of 0.1 ppm. Okay. I will just show two examples of data interpretation in France. One is from a few years ago. There was a huge heat wave in France in 2003 for 2 weeks. So it was really massive event because there was 10 to 15,000 people die in France just because of these 2 weeks excess temperature by 5-10 degrees. You can see it reached all Western Europe and mostly France. So it has an impact on the population, dramatic impact, but also on the vegetation. Generally, we consider that the vegetation, when there is no such extreme event, the vegetation in Europe is absorbing 7 to 12% of the CO2 that we emit in Europe. Then, due to this heat wave, the vegetation didn't work as efficient as usual. So this is what we can see, for example, for the tree rings. We follow the diameter of the development of the tree. We see in red, the year of 2003, the expansion of the trunk were much lower than the previous year. also the crop yield for wheat or maize. I'm not sure you can see, but the crop was much lesser compared to the previous year due to this heat wave. So what is the impact of the atmospheric concentration? At this time, 2003, we didn't have many stations in Europe. We had 3, and one in France, Puy de Dôme, 3 mountain stations, one in Germany, Zollverein, one in Italy, Montecimone. And these are the 2 years of measurement at this site. And we see that for the German and Italian station, we see an anomaly that normally the seasonal cycle is going down till end of August because the vegetation is taking up CO2 by the photosynthesis. And then it stopped somehow in the end of July. And there was this the signal is only 2-4 ppm, but it is something we can measure thanks to the precision we have. Unfortunately, at the Puy de Dôme in France, which is the place where we have where we could expect the highest signal, because this is where we had the highest temperature anomaly. For 2 weeks, the instrument was not working because of the lightning of the station. So we probably missed the most important signal of the decade due to a lightning. So it's a good lesson. So we rely on the model now. We can have a look at the model simulating the station of Puy de Dôme with this data gap, but we see that the model is predicting an anomaly, a higher anomaly of about 10 ppm, but there is no way we can say it's correct or not by the model. Just for your information, that the heat wave, we consider that there was a release of half a gigaton of carbon, which correspond to 4 years of regular carbon. So due to this heat wave, we lost what we were taking up for the last 4 or 5 years in the vegetation, which show you that this carbon sink is quite fragile in front of the climate change. So we learned from this lesson. So we have developed the network now. We have about 10 stations in France, not only 1 in Puy de Dôme. So we are also trying, we have developed also the network to be more operational and to be able to have a spare instruments, spare parts, to be able to react quickly if we have a problem. So again, this inversion framework, we have for France the estimate of the a priori emission by the anthropogenic with statistics, with Paris emission here, and biospheric emission coming from a model, biospheric model in January, July. We have a model, 10-kilometer resolution over France, which is transporting this emission. And I just wanted to illustrate this optimization process that we do. This is for one station, Gif-Servet. This is where we have the institute, close to Paris. In black, you have the measurement for 1 month in January, 1 month in July. So these are the measurement in black. And in blue, you have the result of the simulation using this information. And you see that this inventory is underestimating the CO2 concentration at this station. And so with the process of the inversion optimization, we reach this red curve, which is much more closer to the observations, that's optimization. And to do this modification, we have this optimization, we have modified the flux in a way that is summarized here. We have significant change of the here anthropogenic over France, biospheric. Just to give some ideas, we are correcting by 17 up to 40% the prior estimates. I don't want to go in detail in this figure, but what is important in the inversion is we have to look really. We have only 10 stations in France, so that doesn't mean that we can constrain all the territory. So in the diagnostic, it's important to have a look where we have some uncertainty reduction. So here we have for 2 months anthropogenic biosphere that we see that we have a higher reduction of the uncertainty in July with the biosphere. So that means that the atmospheric network is more efficient to constrain this information. 2 reasons for that. First, because in July the vegetation signal is stronger, so we have a larger signal to detect, so it's easier for the network. And we see that for the same month, for the anthropogenic, you have many white regions, which means that the atmospheric stations are giving 0 information compared to the prior. So these regions are under constraint. That means that if we want to improve somehow the anthropogenic emission in this area, we just have to add some atmospheric station. So this is a way we are trying to get finally the optimal network. Also, for each station, I will not go in details, but the color corresponds to the weight of the station. In the fact is giving more or less information to constrain the flux. We can see, for example, that the mountain stations are less efficient to constrain the flux because they see air which is in the free troposphere and which is less related to what is going on at the surface. Okay. So this was for France. Now we are going progressively to smaller scale. I hope I'm not too long. So why do we want to go now to apply this kind of inverse study of CO2 at the city scale, which is really a new activity in the community? First, well, city accounts for 70% of CO2 emission, anthropogenic emission. So, and it's occurring on the small area of the planet. So it's important. And also, something which is important is that there is probably the people from the cities generally are more proactive, more ready to take action compared to the responsible of the states. Look at the US, for example. There are many cities like Los Angeles or California who want to take action to reduce the emission, which is not the case at the level of the state. So it's important to to help to provide a method to the city also to check if the decisions that will be taken to reduce the CO2 emission are effective or not. So then again, this is a challenge because we have a large uncertainty in the inventory. This is an example for Paris that we have 4 different inventories giving an estimate without atmospheric concentration. Giving an estimate of the CO2 emission, we see that we have a difference between the different scenarios by 50% on the global, but it can be up to 60%, for example, to the estimate of what is emitted by the transport sector. So there is a large space for improvement, which is where we want to have atmospheric measurements. So that's why we have been installing around Paris, Paris downtown. We have been installing 7 stations in the direction of the dominant wind, because we want to make measurement upwind and downwind to see how much the city is moving the concentration due to the emission. So this is the instrument we have installed. And this is just one result, a little bit complicated, but here in gray you have the statistic inventory, which is done, for example, here in Mexico is done by CEDEMA. So we have an equivalent in Paris, giving this estimate over 1 year of what are the anthropogenic emissions of Paris. If we use, in addition, the information from this station, we come to the green line. So basically, we decrease a little bit the emission, and with a stronger seasonal cycle, which seems to be correlated with the seasonal variability of the temperature. So probably this is an indication that the statistic is not taking into account very well this variability of the temperature, which has an impact in how the people are heating the house or using the climatization or whatever. And so, okay, if we look at the total emission from Paris, we see that the inventory was given about this value, and we decrease this value by about 20%. Thanks to the atmospheric measurement. And then this inventory was recalculated in 2010 independently from the atmospheric measurement, and actually they came up with a value which is much more closer from what we have been estimating for the atmosphere, which gave us a good confidence that the atmospheric station, even if we have only few stations, was doing a pretty good job to correct the uncertainty in the city emission. So then, from this CO2, we can only give an information about the total emission. Generally, what is interesting for the stakeholder of Paris, mayor, for example, they want to know, but if I reduce the transport, can you say something about the efficiency of this action, about the reduction of the transport? Or not, or if other actions. So they want to have information by different emission sector. So this is something we want to test. We have tested in few campaign basis, is to use the isotope composition of the CO2 using the C14 and C13. So you know probably that most of the carbon is carbon 12. and you have 1% of C13 and less C14. What is interesting with this isotope of the CO2 is that radiocarbon is a radioactive molecule which has a lifetime of about 6,000 years. So that means that in the core or the ore that you extract from the ground, which is millions of years old, there is no more radiocarbon inside. So the CO2 that you inject in the atmosphere from the anthropogenic is free from C14. So that's why we are decreasing the value of C14. We can see that in this comparison of two stations. Cabau is a station in close to Amsterdam city in Netherlands, and close to the anthropogenic emission. And this is a comparison to the background station in Switzerland, further away from the anthropogenic activity. And we see that this depletion of radiocarbon is proportional to the anthropogenic emission. So we have an indication really of anthropogenic. Then C13 can be used also because the isotopic composition of the may differ depending of which type of fuels you are using, from natural gas, liquid fuel, or solid fuel. And what is interesting, generally, the type of gas is related to the, some emission factor. For example, for the car, we are using gasoline, so it's liquid fuel, whereas for the house, we are more using natural gas. So we have been organizing some campaign in Paris a few years ago. So we don't have the instrument to make this measurement of C14 and C13 on a continuous basis. It's too expensive, too difficult at the moment. And so we are taking for a few days, and I show here one example of one day, some samples that then we bring to a central laboratory to make this isotopic measurement. So here is the total CO2, continuous measurement, and the flask, which we are taking up. And then from the radiocarbon measurement, we can say that from this signal over the duration of one day, we have this variability which is due only to the fossil fuel emission, and this one is due to the biospheric activity, which means that even in the center of Paris, about 1/4 of the variability of the signal is due to the vegetation. Okay, even in the big city. So for the rest, majority of the signal is due to the anthropogenic emission, and from that we can say, using C13 measurement, that about 70% is coming from the gas fuel, so mostly from the residential sector, and 30% coming from the liquid fuel, so mostly for the traffic transport. So this is something we want to develop in the future more systematically, this measurement of isotopes. And again, the question we get from the mayor of Paris is, okay, you can give me an estimate of the Paris. It's not Paris, it's a city of Zurich, but they are facing the same problem. But what they want to know in different parts of the city, can you say something about if we reduce here the traffic, can you see a reduction of the CO2, can you say something with the atmosphere? So we have really this challenge that the CO2 is very variable due to many local sources, local hotspots. So we cannot just use few points. We will have to make much more measurements in the city. And we will have also a challenge with the modeling, because we will need very high resolution model to interpret, to make the link between the surface emission and the atmospheric concentration. So for this case, they are using 10 meters resolution transport, for example. So then, if we want to develop the measurement in a city, coming back to the precision that I talked about, the 0.1 ppm, these are different stations. One very remote, the place where I spent 1 year making CO2 measurement, the Amsterdam Island, the Indian Ocean, far from anything, and in the center of Paris. So it seems to be the same signal, but the vertical scale is not the same. So if we compare the two on the same scale, you see that you have 2 orders of magnitude in the variability of CO2 in Paris, as expected, compared to the background site. So we can question, is it really needed to use the same protocol to characterize the same instrument and same protocol to characterize this one and this one? So the protocol we have been establishing for ICOS, for the European Infrastructure Research, has been developed for this station. And the question with 0.1 ppm precision, but we think that if we have a measurement at plus or minus 1 ppm, so if we degrade the precision by 1 order of magnitude, it should be enough still to characterize this variability. Still, it's difficult to find such instrument making 1 ppm precision measurement. So we have been testing some so-called low-cost CO2 sensor. And this is the one which will be developed, which will be installed in Mexico City in the future. We'll come back to that. And so we not go in detail with this result, but we think that we can have a precision of plus or minus 1 ppm with this instrument. So there is a big implication in the station. This is one ICOS station measuring not only CO2 but other gases. So we can calculate the cost if you want, and this is one station that installed in the city of Zurich with one low-cost sensor. Of course, there is a difference of cost here. And the implication is that, of course, with this costly station for CO2, it's about 100,000 euro to measure CO2 at each point here. So we have a limited number of sites in Europe, about 50, with a precision, very high precision, 0.1 ppm. If we use this kind of low cost, the cost is about 1,000 euro. Of course, we can deploy much more instruments. This is what they are doing in Switzerland, to deploy 300 sites, 300 instruments, with 70 in the city of Zurich. This is really a first study of this type. But when we say we are using low-cost sensor, it doesn't mean we can use any sensor giving some CO2 signals. This is another sensor that you can find in the market. This is even cheaper, but considering the precision, plus or minus 50 ppm, there is no way we can use any information from this sensor. So still, we are going to use a low-cost sensor, but we are really making a lot of tests to make sure that this sensor will be able to provide a reasonable precision if we apply an ad hoc protocol to correct for the possibility dependency to the temperature, pressure, etc. So just to finish with this project, French-Mexican project. So we will do this. So the project is involving CCA, LSCE, CDMA for the inventory CO2, and also a small company doing which is an expert in the high resolution modeling in air quality. The project is funded by CONACYT and ANR. So, thanks to this project, we will develop first monitoring of CO2 network in Mexico City, together with a high-resolution transport model to make the inversion that I've been talking about before. And the objective is to try to improve and to make more robust inventories done by CDMA, and also to really make a research about this kind of network based on local sensor, and also to provide high precision measurement to other scientists in the world. So again, you know, this is an inversion. So the good point for Mexico City is that we can use this 1 kilometric resolution inventory developed by CDMA. So this is really a very important piece of work that we will be using. And then we will have a high resolution model to transport this flux and to make simulate. And then we will develop the inversion, different work package. Also, the good thing is that you already have here, thanks to Michel Group, good infrastructure. You have already high precision measurement available at here at UNAM and at the top of the Alzomoni. And in addition, there are also this measurement of total column. If you have questions about this measurement, ask to Michel, not to me. There's already instruments there, and the inconvenience of the total column measurement is that the signal is less because you are making an average of the total column of CO2, but the advantage is that this measurement is less sensitive to the very local variability of sources compared to the surface measurement, and also less sensitive to the error in the atmospheric transport model. And then for the project, there will be a third instrument which will be purchased, which will be enable some measurement upwind, downwind of the city to have an integrated view of of the increase of the total column of CO2 due to the emission of CO2, and we will deploy 10 to 15 low-cost sensors at different sites corresponding to the air quality network, because we want also to use some additional information about carbon monoxide, NOx, in order to have some possibility to try to estimate the role of the transport, for example, using NOx. Of course, we want to use any kind of information, so we hope that we'll be able to make, for example, some campaign basis measurement of isotope, like the one I show in Paris. If we get the funding for that, it would be nice. Also, we'll try to convince the satellite to make as much as possible measurement of Mexico. This is a target mode of OCO2, an American US-based satellite, which is making the total column measurement, the same kind of measurement that Michel is doing from the ground for 2 cases. And so the problem is that there are very few measurements on this mode. So we, thanks to this project, Merci CO2, we can go to this guy and say, okay, it will be good if you can give us more measurement. So I think that's it. So I will not go into this conclusion. I would prefer, if you have a question, that we spend some time. So I give you maybe we can discuss in 1 year from now to discuss more, not only about the concept of this project, but hopefully with some result of this Merci project. Just to finish, this is one slide, the slide I don't show to the student. In the first one, I show you the nice picture of the site, but just for my own career, I have started from here, making measurement, and last year I was doing measurement here. So, okay. It's less fun. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Very interesting talk. Abrimos para preguntas. Aquí hay una.
Hello. Thank you for the nice talk. I have well. You mentioned at the beginning that of the total of the emissions of CO2, 24% goes to the ocean. Is absorbed by the ocean.
Yes.
And this causes acidification.
Sure.
I think this is a topic that is not very well known by the public in general.
Yeah.
And what do you think will be like the first impacts for people due to this acidification of the ocean?
Well, first, of course, there will be some potentially some huge problem in the next decades about the fisheries due to the acidification, and there are many programs which are being started, at least in Europe, to follow this measurement. When we start talking about this risk of acidification, which is measured, it's not only a risk, it's a fact. Then it was also, as a consequence, there was some project. There was some geoengineering project of putting more CO2 in the sea, which was stopped, which was a good point. That because there are different ways to reduce the concentration of CO2 in the atmosphere. Either you reduce the emission, which will be the best way, but it's not the easiest way. Either you try to act on the sink. So you can find some way to put more CO2 in the ocean. So due to this important effect of acidification, I think there is no more project like this, but still in the vegetation, we have still some project to try to boost the vegetation growth or to store some CO2 in the geological reserve. But of course, the problem of these things, either in the ocean or in the biosphere, is not a permanent thing. You cannot say that I have put carbon in the forest by growing plants, but the forest we have planted have a lifetime of 10, 100 years, depending on if you are in tropic or in the boreal. So once the forest is died, then the carbon is just coming out to the atmosphere. So we are just gaining some time. In the ocean, the lifetime of what is going in the ocean is what is longer. It's about 1,000 years before it's going out again in the atmosphere, most of it.
Merci beaucoup. I
Can
have
continue in French, if you want.
ouais, un peu. I have two questions. The first one is, what kind of instrumentation did you use for measure the CO2 fluxes at Paris? It was a Picaro and 3D
Yeah, for Paris, the 7th station we have because we had some funding.
Okay.
we start with high precision measurements, the same Picaro CRDS instrument that we have not been installing low cost. So we have a project with a big company called Suez to install 40 low cost instruments in Paris to complement this high precision network. Yeah.
Okay.
So far.
And the second question is related to the low cost instruments.
Yeah.
Some of them have a low precision,
Yeah.
but the times of response is not so fast, or it is.
No.
They can achieve changes in concentration from 1 second to the other, or are not so fast in.
But for this, because we don't measure directly the flux, it's not eddy flux measurement, it's concentration measurement. So we don't really need a fast measurement like you need in the eddy flux method. So if we have a 1 minute average, that's just enough for us. So that's not an issue.
From 1 minute to another. Okay.
Yeah. But then we are working a lot to see how we can correct for the possible variability, drift of this low-cost sensor, because we have this small sensor, and we cannot say that for each small sensor, which costs a few hundred bucks, we will put 3 big calibration tanks associated to that. That makes no sense. So we have to find another way to correct for this drift. So we are testing so far some multi-parameterization method to try to correct for the temperature effect, pressure effect, H2 effect, and to have them getting back every month to a central place to make measurement in parallel with the Picaro, to try to train them for this multi-parameter statistical correction. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much.
And this is the way we want to do here in Mexico City also.
Hello, thank you very much. Sanchez Cabeza, Marine Sciences Institute.
So you can answer better than me about
I could probably, working on that, yeah. 2 questions. These low-cost, reasonable precision instruments, are they already commercially available?
Yes, this one is a Sweden company.
Sweden?
Yeah.
Okay.
And there are 3 models, because we are interacting a lot with them. As part of ICOS, we have a meteorological lab is in charge of testing any kind of instrument coming up in the market. So now the company knows that, so they gave us some instruments that we can test, and we can provide some recommendation. And if they are smart enough, they take into account this modification. So they will provide new models, probably next January, which should be a little bit better. But and we are looking for other companies. So if you know, we are interested to contact them. But so far, this is the best one we have been testing.
And you mentioned this satellite, OCO2, yeah? Is this satellite providing already reliable information, and is it available?
Yeah, it is available. It's about it's more than 1 ppm precision. The problem is that it is sensitive to the clouds, and it doesn't make measurement during the night. The clouds. So finally, they were promising a lot of measurement, but when you remove the cloudy areas, because, for example, for sure the satellite will be important for the Amazonia, for example, where we don't have any measurement. So we expect a lot from the satellite, but there are always clouds over the Amazonia. So the satellites are also blind. So they are not providing the information that we were expecting. So in a few years, there will be the first active satellite with a LiDAR for CH4. So we should provide more measurement. But there are many satellites, maybe 10 of them in the 10, 15 years, which will be launched. Some are dedicated, for example, for the city scale, to have a smaller patch measurement. So this will be really a massive modification of the information we have in the next decade. There are satellites from the US, Europe, China, Japan.
Tenemos tiempo para más preguntas. ¿Alguna otra?
Michelle, what is the sensing mechanism for the low-cost sensors?
It's also NDIR, or infrared measurement. Yeah. This one. We are testing a new one with photoacoustic by a French company, but it's really a prototype, and so far it's not working very well.
Okay, and a second question. You show that for the first inventory for Paris and the second one, there was a big difference.
Yep.
And the second one was much closer to the
Yep.
real measurements. What was the difference between the two? How they achieved that?
Good point. I cannot answer to your question. I know exactly what was the modification. Yeah.
It was not the temperature.
No.
No.
It was really independent work from them, because we have done this inversion independently from them. We are not working with this institute, but I don't know exactly what was. I will check. Yeah.
Thank you.
¿Alguna otra pregunta del público?